The modern communist perspective is riddled with the history of their own past failures. The ghosts of post-communist attempts to bring about socialism still haunts contemporary communists. The unforgivable sins against humanity committed by the Soviet Union and Maoist China loom large in their collective imagination. The dismissal and denigration of tankies, meaning Bolsheviks, is therefore the default position of online leftists at the moment. However, there is another bastard child of their failed religion, one that is despised more than any vanguardist will ever be. The spectre that haunts modern communism is fascism. Despite communist denials, fascism is a direct lineal descendant of Marx. Israeli liberal historian Ziv Sternhell was considered the foremost authority on fascism during the 20th century, and in his book Neither Left Nor Right, he details the genesis of fascism as an attempt to achieve socialism after it became evident that Marx was wrong. Marx had predicted the uprising of the working classes against their bourgeois masters, but by the end of the 19th century it was apparent that this was not the case. The proletariat was not a revolutionary force. In fact, it was deeply conservative. Upon realizing this, the international communist movement splintered into many different factions. In England, the Fabians decided to attempt to achieve socialism through incremental change. In Russia, the Bolsheviks formed a vanguard of elite intellectuals who carried out the revolution that overthrew the weak government of Tsar Nicholas II and tyrannized the Russian people. And in France, an idealist rewriting of Marx replaced the proletariat as the revolutionary body with that of the entire nation itself. This merged with Italian syndicalism to become what we today call fascism. The details of this are complex, and so linked in the notes of this video will be a breakdown of Sternhell's book that you can watch at your leisure. Put simply, the concept of incorporating each strata of society into one totalitarian whole would transform not just the proletariat, but the entire nation into a revolutionary body. This is the direct philosophical line from Marx to Mussolini, and you can't achieve one without the other. Fascism does not haunt the liberal mind in the same way as it does the socialist mind, because you can't get to fascism through liberalism. Indeed, they are heading in polar opposite directions. Where liberalism seeks decentralization of power and a separation between the public and the private lives of individuals, fascism seeks the totalization of state power over all aspects of society with no limits on its authority. The liberal does not want a totalitarian state to allow managerial elites to control every aspect of a person's life, and so the liberal or conservative is in no danger of approaching fascism. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that all of the fascist revolutionaries of the 20th century were communists of some stripe first. And it is because fascism is one of the bastard children of the failed communist dreams of the 19th century that it is the terror of modern communists. They know that they are promoting an ideology with a history of catastrophic failure, and their only hope is to double down on Marxism and pray it somehow pans out as expected this time. All the while pathologizing anyone who observes that this materialist mumbo-jumbo doesn't work as a fascist. Which is why you get socialist takes like this. Anyone who is not a communist is a fascist. The tension that underlies the message is self-evident. The obsession with fascism belies the author's fear that fascism and communism are intimately connected. In fact, from their paradigm, they appear to be the only two options, and in their myopic minds, if you aren't one, you must be the other. But where has the socialist got left to go? If we're trying to create a scientific, rational society over fundamentally irrational beings, what choice do you have but to control everything about them? When people are left to their own habitual devices, they don't act in the way that the managerial socialist elite would prefer. The numbers on the spreadsheets don't add up. As philosopher Robert Nozick observed, any amount of free action destroys the bureaucrat's dream of equality. In his book Anarchy, State and Utopia, Nozick shows that liberty upsets patterns because if people are entitled to spend their money as they see fit, then they will inevitably spend it in ways that create inequalities. If this inequality is still considered unjust for any reason, then a mandate is created for continuous interference with a person's behaviour to ensure that equality is maintained. Essentially, any capitalist act, as he put it, between consenting parties would have to be forbidden, creating license for draconian control to maintain continuous equality. Is the demand for measurable material equality really so important as to abolish all other social goods like freedom, family, and personal interests? The socialist has nowhere left to turn other than the total incorporation of all aspects of society into a monstrous deity-like state that has a remit to control our entire lives. Fundamentally, this commitment to a rationally ordered society becomes irrational. This is why I consider socialism to be a kind of religion of the Enlightenment. The fantasy that all can be brought within the control of a rational planner is simply not achievable nor desirable. I don't want or need this to be the case, and there's no particularly good reason that it should be, other than to fulfill the teleology of the socialists' sacred texts. Well, I'm not a socialist of any kind. I don't care if their goal is not achieved. I don't think that they can achieve a utopia, and I wouldn't want their utopia even if it were possible. I don't want the state to be given license to intrude, incorporate, and command every part of my life, and you shouldn't either. It is the governing philosophy that is responsible for the absolute horrors of the 20th century, possibly the worst century mankind has ever experienced. It wasn't natural disasters or barbarian invasions that caused hundreds of millions of deaths. It was socialist midwits who thought they knew more than they did and ought to impose this vision by force on the vast populations of the world to nobody's benefit but their own. Socialism is a religious conviction and a blood-soaked vanity project. By now, we should have realized that these people are dangerous and are not prepared to listen to reason. This zeal renders them dangerous, irrational, and prone to misunderstanding what is actually happening around them. Be aware or be next. These fascists are coming for you. One take. Smashed.